Hello, everyone, to day two of the AAEEBL Symposium. My name is Helen Chen. I'll be the moderator for this session. I'm delighted to introduce Susan Bonham from Langara College or is it Langara University?
It's Langara College, yeah.
College in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. She's rounding out representing for our international contingent. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Susan to start her presentation.
Thank you so much, Helen. I am just going to share the resource. I will be talking through this portfolio about this project, but if anyone wants to look at it themselves or look at it more closely later, you're welcome to do so. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oops, actually didn't want to. Let's try that again. I'm not going to share the entire screen if I can do that. There we go. That's better. So this session is about an ePortfolio directed student project that we have started. We really started talking about it in the fall last year, and have kind of done round one into round two. And I just wanted to share, it's going to be very practical, like what we did, how we prepared for it, and then, how we reflected on how the first session went and how we've adjusted going forward and what we're planning to do next. But before I launch into that, I did want to acknowledge that I am joining you today from Snowyth Lalem, Langara College, which is on unceded and ancestral Musqueam territory. So much of what we're striving to do with ePortfolios is about storytelling, and storytelling is such an important part of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. So I just want to acknowledge that that is definitely aligned with, I think, the work that most of us are trying to do. High impact practices generally, but definitely ePortfolios. So to give a little bit of background, I should probably start with myself. I am faculty at the college. Prior to joining the ed tech department, I taught in the English for Academic Purposes program for 7 years. And prior to that, I worked as an ESL teacher in settlement English language programs in Canada. So these are government funded classes for newcomers to Canada, teaching them language skills, but also, about the education system here, the medical system here, etc. And my own graduate research was action research with my own students, and it was on multimodal identity text. So there was a lot of alignment again. I didn't know I'd end up working so much with ePortfolios later, but it was really, really good kind of background for what I do now. My role at the college is largely, well, I'm non-instructional. I have traditionally more supported faculty directly with the technology tools to support teaching and learning. We've really been pivoting with the decline in international student enrollment to try and do a better job with student support as well. So although before I was kind of having to support students through faculty, I'm doing a ton more direct to student initiatives and support now than I ever have been. And as soon as we started doing ePortfolios, I have been doing like onboarding with students and going into classrooms and stuff, but now it's literally running sessions for students. Students can email me, students can come in and meet with me. So we're really moved much more to both supporting faculty and supporting students. In terms of what this project is that I'm going to be talking about today, we got PebblePad in 2021, and I was when I was hired in this position, I was told, "Oh, you're going to lead the ePortfolio pilot with PebblePad," and I was like, "Oh, what's PebblePad?" Like, it's really coming in cold. I think Gail's here. Gail knows that. I was asking for a lot of help with Gail that first year. But the reason we got an ePortfolio platform was because we had a ground roots request from a number of departments wanting an ePortfolio platform. So that was co-op in our design program and a whole bunch of different programs. But what ended up happening was out of that in 2021, people had had a year of pivoting to technology, to teaching online, teaching remotely, and they were maxed out on learning new platforms. And all of our what we thought were going to be our pilot participants pretty much backed out. And so our PebblePad use ended up being very much not traditionally portfolios. It was adopted by our nursing program for all their clinical courses, by a lot of our practicum programs. So it was very the guided, scaffolded end of the PebblePad platform, where you're creating resources and you're saying, okay, answer this question, upload this piece of evidence. Like it wasn't, weren't creating their own pages. They didn't have a lot of agency with what was going into the content on the platform, etc. So we've struggled with this all along. How do we get more ePortfolio adoption? And the issue that we're at right now is that with this focus on trying to attract students, engage students, retain students, have students be successful here at our college, we really are missing this ePortfolio piece. Now, we do have some courses that are capstone and that are doing some kind of ePortfolio assignment, but it's really minimal. So we just had to figure out, okay, how can we grow this? And I'm sure this is very common, but convincing programs and instructors to adopt ePortfolio assignments, despite all the benefits of them, is super challenging. And so, we hear, oh, we don't have time. I've got a huge workload, or I'm teaching at multiple institutions and I just cannot take on something new, especially something so different, etc. So we hear that a lot. There's all kinds of things. So I don't want to learn a new technology, whatever the reasons are. We thought, okay, well, we're still going to try that. We're still going to do everything we can to get more uptake of portfolio practice. But in the meantime, we've got all these students who are not getting the opportunity to engage with ePortfolios because they're not coming across it in their formal courses. So we decided maybe we should try and offer this directly to students. So we knew that some of the obstacles would be that students, for the most part, don't know what an ePortfolio is. So you have to start by trying to even understand what it is, what the value is, etc. And the other thing is that, it's not something that they can create in 1 hour. So we're asking them to engage in something outside of their volunteering, their work, their school, their families, that they're going to have to devote time to outside of formal classes. So these are going to be our obstacles. We knew that going in. However, we do have some really good potential entry points that we've been trying to work with. One of the things that we've been hearing from both our co-op program and unfortunately through layoffs of colleagues, because like almost everyone probably on this meeting, we have had such a decline in international students and their tuition that we have had a lot of layoffs. And a lot of our colleagues that have gotten laid off, as well as the co-op program, have told us it is much more common to be asked for a portfolio as they're applying for jobs because AI can just spit out cover letters and resumes. So that is a selling point we can take to students and say, you may be asked for a portfolio when you're looking for work. And if you have one ready to go that you spent some time on and that you're, comfortable with being a showcase, you're in a much better position than it's not the kind of thing you can whip together overnight when, oh my gosh, I have to apply for a job tomorrow. So that's one big selling point. And when we talk to students, they immediately perk up when you mention that. The other thing is that students we have worked with have definitely been able to clearly articulate, which we do have some interview recordings and some, ePortfolio examples that very clearly articulate things that have come out in many of your research, which is that they were discovering that they had employability skills that they didn't realize when they were making their portfolio. They also felt that they had so much increased confidence in articulating what they know and what they can do from the process of creating their portfolio. So they were kind of like students who were about to graduate. And I'm really nervous about doing job interviews. They spent a couple months making a portfolio and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much more confident. Like if someone asked them, what's a skill that you developed, or, what was a challenging situation you had and how did you overcome it, right? Like they're ready now for those questions through the process of creating the portfolio. And then also, a lot of them find it quite fun once they get going and sort of making the design choices and making something that's multimodal. So those are kind of be like our starting points of how we can get in there. Of course, there's all kinds of benefits that we all know about with the portfolios. So at that point, we're like, okay, let's see if we can come up with something. This is, we're into September, October at this point, and we decided, our director asked me, do you think you can get something going for January? I'm like, Okay. So one of the things that I did was went through a real consultation stage, basically in several areas. We did go out and survey students. We went literally to, the cafeteria, the library, and asked students to do a survey for us. Talk to other departments that did run direct to students programming, consulted with experts outside of Langara, and then tried to consolidate our research into a plan for the semester one. So that was all done in a very short period of time. In terms of what the students said, we went to the library, and we had a QR code with an MS form survey with the questions you can see on there. Hopefully they're not too small. Got a bit bigger actually. And candy. Everyone who talked to us, would you like some candy? That got people to stop and talk to us generally. And literally starting with, do you have an ePortfolio? Once we explained what it was, which we almost always had to do, would you be interested in creating one if it helped your employability and your learning? Would you come to a workshop? Those kind of things. So here's what our results were. Do you have an ePortfolio? 5 of the students we talked to had. Everyone else, no or not sure, right? So basically, we're talking. This confirmed the need. Would you be interested in creating a portfolio? Well, this one was pretty good. And 98% either yes or maybe, largely yes. Only one no. Would you attend a workshop? Again, 83% yes. So that was great. And then we asked them, what format of the workshop, about half, 50-50 almost, with one and done 90-minute workshop, which obviously there's only so much we can do, but at least we'll get them in there and get them started, versus a series of topics that were shorter workshops, half and half. And then we asked them what might make you come out. Snacks was number one. And I have to say, Gail Ring's on this call, and Gail told us snacks would be number one, because I'm going to talk about what Gail said when I consulted her in a minute. But I thought it was very interesting that number 2 and 3 were fun social atmosphere and networking with other students. I had a really strong feel that I should probably do these face to face. And that obviously was more evidence that, yeah, this was something that I always feel like these workshops, when it comes to ePortfolios, work so much better in person than online. I do give other workshops online, and they're absolutely fine to do online, but there's something about ePortfolios. It's just better to be in person. And so we generally try to do them that way. So that was the consultation with students. In terms of the other departments, I consulted Student Life, Langara Global, Campus Wellness, and Student Services. And they had some really helpful, extremely practical advice. Basically said 4:30 events that went from 4:30 on were best attended because most students were done their classes. Avoid Fridays unless virtual. They said, and this was a good warning because it's very, very true. Expect 25 to 50% of those who register to show up. So you might want to allow for oversubscription, but also don't feel bad if if you get in signups and then no one's showing up. And I had to, that was sort of a bit soul crushing because that happened repeatedly, but they had warned me, which was helpful. Sending out a reminder, and then Student Life asked them about volunteers, and they were able to help me recruit volunteers and give them credit under the volunteer program. So that was great. Communications and marketing. So we do have Langara Strategic Communications and Marketing Department, SCM, and they were able to help with digital signage and limited social media. They put things in their stories, and they do have an events page, and they added our workshops to their events. We also did get posters printed that we put on all the open bulletin boards around campus. We gave out postcards to any departments who could share them. And the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of other departments is I actually been talking to our Applied Research Center about ePortfolios for a very long time. Like, they were one of our early adopters. They do use PebblePad for their onboarding and getting the students to set goals and reflect that are involved in research projects. But they also have had problems encouraging the students to create their own portfolios based on that experience. So what we talked about there, and we have been talking about for a long time, is trying to get the faculty that are involved in the research with the students more on board with the value of a portfolio, and the students encouraging the students to make a portfolio. So she had some ideas about that. And so that was definitely factored in as well. In terms of outside the college, as I mentioned, Gail Ring has just been a great person to work with. She was our main consultant, right from the get-go that I've been working with. And she did run the ePortfolio program at Clemson for over 8 years. So she had some absolutely relevant experience in terms of how this can be done. She recommended, if you can get into classes that can be successful, but it's one and done. So, think beyond that. She said that recognizing excellence was absolutely one of the best tools that you have. So if we could come up with a student awards or student showcases to create a recognition system, ecosystem, that would be really helpful. She mentioned industry networking, not something that we've managed to do yet, but it is on our radar. And student workshops, which obviously is one of the things we went to. And she had some advice about advertising, which is actually really challenging, as we've discovered, but she had some good advice. Christina Hopner also got me in touch with Nolene O'Keefe at Dublin City University, because they have a very well-established ePortfolio awards program. And Nolene's best advice for us was, making sure there's some kind of feedback opportunity for students, especially if they're doing it outside of a class, because most of their students have actually done their ePortfolio as a part of an assignment. So they have had that opportunity for feedback. But she said, we're going to need to think about whether to have drop-in sessions or some other way for students to get feedback once they get building. She talked about the need for technical support for students, generally not a problem for us because we are a technical support department. So we kind of start there. Again, advertising all channels available, which we've really taken to heart and tried to get the word out every possible way, including trying to get instructors and staff to promote the ePortfolio workshops, et cetera, et cetera. And then she said, a really important tied to the awards or the recognition, whatever you're doing, is have a celebration. She said that they have a big awards ceremony that's in person every year to announce the winners. They invite dignitaries, they have catering, they make sure they've hired a photographer. And what's really interesting is that the students will immediately repost those pictures taken by the photographer on social media. Other students like it. Again, you're creating that feedback loop in terms of ePortfolios. So this isn't everyone I talk to, but these are kind of like, the really actionable people that I got advice from. I did want to also mention that the ABLE board has meet the board sessions, at least they have been. And so I did get some input from Helen and other people, because if there's an opportunity to go and get advice, I will take it. So anyone that would talk to me, I would. And also even prior to this, like about a year before this, I did meet with Tracy Pennylight, and she had mentioned getting, if possible, hiring students and getting student examples, which we had done last year in spring 2025. So I use those student examples all the time when I'm promoting to faculty, when I'm promoting to the students in the workshops, we look at the student examples. So that was also incredibly important advice. So all of that, we came up with a plan. So January, we launched the workshops. We ran them from January 13th to April 2nd. There were 2 options based on the student input. We ran ePortfolio Foundations, a 90-minute express session that covered the fundamentals, and we did a 30-minute explorer session, which was not well attended. So we knew that number 1 would be good. I think I'm almost out of time. So I'm just gonna leave you to explore what our plans were and just quickly go over what we learned. So one thing was really important, the 12 o'clock, terrible. So we just focus now on 4:30 workshops, 4:30 to 6. We scrapped the series of 30-minute workshops and have now 2 90-minute workshops. The second 90-minute workshop, so our part two workshop, is based on the three that were the most popular: design, employability, and creating a digital presence, which I have to also shout out to Helen because her group at Stanford, I went to the ePortfolio Australia session. Helen knows this. I have told Helen I adapted that for students. Totally credit them in the resources. And so now we have like kind of a part one and part two, and that seems to be working quite well. We also moved the visibility. We were running them out of our own offices, which were quite hidden. So we now run them in the library. Been a good change. We have just more walk by traffic and people are, what are you doing? And we can talk to them, easier to find, etc. Our open feedback sessions weren't successful, but students will, I offer if you want to talk to me about your portfolio. So I have had students come and meet with me, and we're figuring out how to do more feedback opportunities going forward. And we have got funding for ePortfolio awards. So although I haven't been able to advertise them until about the last week, they're live. They're going to be submissions in March of 2027, awarded April 30th, 2027. We're really hoping that will be our incentive that we need, the carrot to get people in and to like keep building, because every student that comes to the workshop has been incredibly positive and they've been like, they totally see the value, but now we're asking them to make time to actually move forward and create a portfolio. So we're hoping that the chance of a $500 value award will do it. And one of the award categories is a collaborative portfolio with faculty. So you've either, or staff. So they've had feedback, or it's been a project, a research project they're working with faculty on, a class assignment they got feedback on, and how did that feedback inform your work and your learning? And that way, hopefully, then we'll get more buy-in from faculty because they will be, part of it. Okay. Sorry, I probably went too long, but questions?
This is great, Susan. Really terrific. And then would you be willing to share your portfolio with us so that we can
It
go?
didn't it work because
Oh,
I
did it
thought I
work? Oh,
shared it at the
is in there? Okay, maybe I just missed
beginning.
it. I might have
It's
missed it.
it's right above your post with all the
Oh, got
links.
it. Got it. Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Great. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. That's fantastic. I would really encourage you to also consider maybe submitting something for AEPR, on this. I mean,
Please.
it's such a great journey with some very practical tips, at the end. Um, Anyone have any
Yes, please
questions?
submit.
Yes. Yeah. Any questions for Susan?
I have one.
Please, Andrew.
Susan, this sounds wonderful. I'm really curious what kinds of things students are surfacing. What are the experiences that they're talking about, and what are the aspects of themselves and their process and their journey that they're highlighting?
Well, a lot of them are, as would make sense, bringing in class assignments that they think are pretty, connected to what their goals are and their things that they think, oh yeah, this is something I would need to show evidence that I can do. And then, really talking to them, encouraging them about the reflection piece. Okay, you can't just just can't put an artifact in. You need to say like, what you learned from this and why it was important to you and, all those things. And I do give them a resource on reflection, etc. So that's one thing. I think the thing that was really interesting to me that I wasn't expecting was that they get a little bit like resume bound. Like I have to kind of encourage them to think of this as something a bit broader. Like you're expressing who you are, so you don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with, but you can bring in what are your hobbies, what are your interests,
Mm-hmm.
who are you, and that is sort of like something that I kind of have to I don't want to say push them, but they're just like, oh, I had this one student who was he was one of my volunteers this semester, so he came to a lot of the workshops. And then I was talking to him about his own portfolio, and he was like really stuck on just skills, 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 skills. And I said, okay, well, what's your theme going to be? And he said, oh, and I can't remember what his initial thing was, but he just couldn't get to a theme. And I said, well, what's your favorite thing to do? And he said snowboarding. And I'm like, well, what about doing a mountain theme? Like that would just design it gives coherence, it gives a little bit of you, of what your passions are. Then you can say, well, if I do want to do mountains or something, it's going to maybe design your color choices. And he was like, oh my gosh, like it hadn't occurred to him that, oh, you can like express your own personality in this portfolio and connect it then to, your employability. And I'm always clear with them, you don't have to share anything you don't want to share. Other thing is like another young guy, he is multilingual, but hadn't really occurred to him that he could include that as, well, these are skills. I mean, they might not be something I've taken a formal class in, but I speak 3 languages. And like, those are the kind of things that you can bring in. And I think that they get really bound to just, either courses or just the rigid things of what you would put on a resume. And this can be bigger than that and more connected.
Great question, Andrew. Thank you. And the value of a good metaphor, also as a tool for reflection as well. I think we're at time, so please join me in thanking Susan as we transition to our next speaker.